Noisy, doesn't it? When there's no music going on. You will notice today that I am not wearing green. For many years, 20 some odd years, we lived next door to a lovely couple, eventually just to a lovely lady who was very much involved in the Catholic Church. She was Irish and many times went to Ireland, and I would keep an eye on her home. She brought me back a beautiful scarf made in Ireland that I will never get to wear down here because it never gets cold enough to wear that, but I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to give it away. St. Patrick's Day has meant a lot to us, but she set me straight. She said, "Pastor, you are not Roman Catholic. You do not wear green on St. Patrick's Day. You wear orange." Well, I don't have anything orange except a t-shirt that I can't wear here anyway. But so in honor of Carol O'Brien, I dressed appropriately today. And just imagine that these shades of brown are more like orange. One of the reasons why St. Patrick's Day, has come to mean so much. 33 years ago today, Sunday, March the 17th, 1991, and you can check my math. I got the calculator out and said 2024 minus a soon-to-be graduate student of Eden Seminary in St. Louis stepped into the pulpit of Hope United Church of Christ. Because as many of you know, even though I had been a minister, I could not get a call in a Baptist church at that time. And my good friend at the Baptist hospital said, "You know what? You need to go to Eden Seminary. And you need to go visit a UCC church." He had served as interim pastor twice in my ministry. And I believed what he said. And he looked at me as I was getting ready to leave, and he grinned a grin that I knew something was coming. He said, "Yeah, you go visit those folks in the UCC. They'll take anybody." And it was true. So I stepped into the pulpit there in view of a call to be their pastor teacher. It was the beginning of 15 wonderful years of a pastorate. It was fun. It was filled with growth, filled with awesome times, and sometimes that were brutal. But you know, I would not change that experience for anything. Sandy and I bought a house 6 blocks from the church, and we couldn't believe how long we had lived there when we decided to move down here. 28 years or something like that. After many years of service as a minister of music, youth, and education, as well as stepping away from ministry, on that day I was finally completing 3 years of preparing to answer the call of the Lord of Isaiah. I was far enough along in my seminary degree that I knew that I didn't even have to show up and I'd graduate, but it was okay. Many times in chapel at seminary, I heard the same call. "Whom shall I send as a messenger? Who will go for us?" And over, for 3 years. I said, "Here am I. Send me." Believe it or not, for many years, my answer to that question, "Do you want to be a pastor when you grow up?" That's the kind of questions that youth ministers get, you know. "Do you want to, when you grow up, do you want to be a pastor?" I said, "No. I am no preacher." You could go to First Baptist Church of Calera, Alabama, who licensed me to preach and had me preach one time, and they would agree he wasn't called to preach. We licensed him to the music and youth ministry. "I am no preacher," I said. "I never want to be a pastor." And then I went to seminary and they said, "You know, we don't have all those other people on our staff. We have pastors, and we're going to turn you into one." Jesus said, "Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Anyone who wants to serve me must follow me." In other words, stop doing what you want to do, Darrell, and do what I want you to do. I learned it's really hard to argue with the Lord. He'll get you every time. One of the things that I discovered in my life after ministry, before ministry again, was that I absolutely love history. If I could go back to Samford University and do it all again, I might have been a history major, at least a history minor, but music majors are not allowed to have a minor because you have so many hours required. But one of my heroes is Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. If you were to come to our house and spend a few moments looking through my library, you would kind of get the picture that no one else has as many volumes in my library as Winston Churchill does. He was devoted not only to Great Britain, but to the free world, and helped to lead us all through World War II. He often had a way of speaking out great principles of life that others, pastors included, tend to skirt around. He once said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." Think about that for a while. How many have retired after after years of working and getting, and they lose their identity because they're no longer that person? We make a life by what we give. That kind of boils down what we try to do with this season of Lent in the church. As a pastor, I absolutely loved Lent because we followed that religiously. It was one time of year when the people that I led actually would come on Wednesday night. They weren't used to doing that. We tried so many times. I came back from a conference one time and said, "All right, I'm going to rename Wednesday night service." And I called it Soul Care. And evidently, they didn't need much soul care. But come Lent, they were very good about coming. I've been told that Lent grew out of a practice of many of the early churches whereby new people would come to the church and they'd say, "Okay, We know you want to be a part of us, but first you must go through this period of study. And so for 40 weekdays plus the weekends that were involved in that, they would talk and study and listen to teaching. And then on Holy Saturday, after learning, here is why we are the church, here is who we follow, this is what Christ asks us to do, here are the ways you can fit into the body. They would spend Holy Saturday night, all night, in a prayer vigil. And early on Sunday morning, they would come out, men in one area, ladies in another. They would take off all their garments and walk into living water that was flowing and be baptized. And as they stepped out, they were given white clothing, signifying they died with Christ, they were resurrected with Christ, and they were the church. So we tried to emulate that at Hope. We would come on Wednesday nights, Ash Wednesday and following, with a few ladies who would make some wonderful dinners. It's the only time they were going to do that. We couldn't get anybody to serve dinners. We didn't have a Beth Marshall or anybody like that, but they would do it for the Lenten study. We'd eat, we'd come to the worship center, and I'd get to teach for a while. And they listened, and it made a difference in some lives. Right up until Easter weekend. And then, because Sandy was involved with children, we would do Thursday night, then Friday night, and then we were in charge of the Easter egg hunt, too. And we'd finish with the Easter egg hunt, and then we had to change everything in the worship center. We had a huge cross that was up behind me, had an altar sitting in front of it, because that's kind of the way the German churches did things, and that's where they grew out of. They always wondered how that cross got draped during Lent. Had a purple drape on it for Lent. And then on Easter Sunday morning, it was white. How did that happen? In hours when the church was empty, the pastor got on the altar and threw a rope up over the cross and pulled it up there. Wasn't ever going to let them see me up on the altar in my stocking feet. So we decorated the worship center and got everything ready and practiced for some music on Easter Sunday. And then came Easter sunrise service, where we did the music and I did a message, and then we'd have breakfast and then Easter service. And after that, I usually got sick because I was absolutely worn out. But that's when I left on vacation. We fully got into having the Sunday after Easter low Sunday, because the organist, pianist, and the pastor were gone. That's okay. That Lenten time was a wonderful time to be a pastor, because people listened, and I was able to teach them some good lessons. Out of that congregation, I had 2 different people who came to me and said, "Pastor, the Lord's calling us. What do we do?" We eventually left our denomination over some of the same things that Methodists have been going through. One of the things that I realized as we got close to voting to leave was, we're not going to have anybody that helps us know what to do anymore. So we had to come up with things like them recognizing my call as a pastor and my ordination, because our denomination pulled my ordination. But they said, "But you were ordained Baptist, right?" I was. So they didn't have to baptize me, but we had to come up with an ordination procedure for those people who gave of themselves and became ministers. We've heard the question over and over, what did you give up for Lent? I gave up dieting. You know, there's just too much good food around here, and especially getting close to the holidays. I'm just waiting until Sandy gives me permission to buy a chocolate bunny, because I love them. Let me ask that question in a different way. What does Jesus call us to give up? How about our life? Those who give their life gain it eternally. That's what he means when he talks about the wheat. He's not trying to teach the farmers how to do their job. But he says when that kernel of wheat goes into the ground, unless it dies to itself, it just goes away. I tell you the truth. If a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone unless it dies to itself. In order to build the kingdom of Christ, we must die to self in order to reach those Christ sends us to. That's what this season's about. The first verses in the John reading today talks about some Greeks. Doesn't give us any explanation why there are Greeks in Israel, but they preceded the Romans. Some Greeks came to see Jesus. They sought out Philip. Why? They don't really explain that, but it may have been because his name was Greek. They thought, here's one of our people. They came to Philip and said, we would like to see Jesus. The translation I like says, "Sir, we would see Jesus." Now see that from Philip's perspective for just a moment. You're one of the 12, a disciple. For 3 years, you've been part of that special group that people all over Israel recognized as one of Jesus' 12. You've spent 3 years of your life following and listening and learning. I think maybe that's where we came up with 3 years for seminary. Have no other idea. Everybody else gets a master's degree in 1 year. Preachers have to have like 100 and some odd hours. So it's almost like going back for another college degree. But it's a whole lot more fun, because you're studying stuff that you learned in Sunday school and you're learning it better. So Philip is saying, I've spent 3 years. Did they ask me the questions? No. Sir, we would see Jesus. Philip, die to self. And he did. He took them to Andrew, and then he and Andrew went on to Jesus. I don't know if they left the Greeks somewhere or not, but it doesn't talk about taking them to Jesus. Jesus responds, "Now the time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory." This is what he was waiting for. When people who have not heard my teaching come to me because they've seen other people, it must be the right time. Can you imagine what might have happened if they had said, "Oh, we can't bother him today. He's been busy. How about you ask us the question?" See, I have this cool nameplate that says, "Philip, disciple." We might not be here. You meet a friend for a cup of coffee because they called up and said, "Can you meet me? Because I need to talk about some things." And even though you don't have the time, you say, "Okay. Just because my job is a little iffy right now and I'm taking off an extra hour, just because I had a little squabble with my spouse this morning and I'm really worried about what I'm not getting for dinner tonight, even though I have all kinds of other problems, sure." And so they unload on you all the things that are happening in their life, and they ask, "What can you suggest?" And you really don't want to wade into that, but then you realize your friend is actually saying to you, "Brother, sister, I would see Jesus. Teach me about Jesus. Show me Jesus in your life." Will it be enough to tell them you'll pray for them? Not hardly. And Jesus says, die to self. Help them as much as you can. And take it from me, he will put the right words in your mouth. Young person, we don't pick on you too often, but I was a youth pastor for a lot of years, and so was my son. Some friends come to you and say, "Hey, we've heard there's going to be a party Friday night, and no adults are going to be there. And there's probably going to be some booze, and maybe even some pills. What do you think? Are you in?" And you want to be popular, and you want to experience life, but you know that they know that you come to church on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and you go to camp, and you wonder what they think about your Christianity. Do you ever hear in their question, "Do you want to come?" where they're actually saying, "We would see Jesus"? Will you take the opportunity to say, "No, that's not me"? How about we do something much safer? And I don't know about you, but at least I'll be able to face my parents on Saturday morning. That's called dying to self and standing for what you say you believe. That's pointing to Jesus. Business person, do you reflect Jesus in your business dealings? Back in the day, in the Baptist churches I grew up in, people would be saying, "Preacher, you've gone to meddling now." Do you need to die to self? Neighbor, do your neighbors see Jesus in you? The world seldom comes right out and proclaims it, but do you watch the news and hear people saying, Sir, madam, we would see Jesus. We need some answers. This world needs some help. Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. And anyone who wants to serve me, Jesus says, they must follow me. What does that look like in 2024? Seems like 1,000 years ago, but back in 1986, Ray Boltz wrote a song that Sandy and I practiced a couple of times, but we never really got around to sharing it, and I've often wished we had. The scene is the Last Supper. He says the disciples are all in attendance, and they're talking about who will be greatest in the kingdom. Who's going to sit on Jesus' right hand? Who's going to be doing things at his command? They didn't notice Jesus as he got up until he knelt in front of them and washed their feet. And then he said to them, this is in the song, I've come to serve you. And if you know the Father's love, like you say you do, you will serve each other too. Do you serve in his name? Do you serve not just those in your circle of friends, not just those you go to church with, but do you serve others in Christ's name? Ray Boltz says, if you know the Father's love, the way you say you do, will you serve each other? Will you serve others whether you know them or not? Will you show them Jesus not by forcing your beliefs on them, but letting them see the love of Christ? Brothers and sisters, we would see Jesus. Pray with me. Father God, as we continue to look toward Holy Week for inspiration for our lives, help us to focus on your meaning for all that happened. Teach us again of the commitment Jesus made for us long before we had even been thought of. The commitment of giving himself because he thought of us. Remind us what it means to follow and to serve. Remind us of your love that sent him and his love that suffered for us. And then increase our love for the world so that we can serve him by serving them. Refresh our commitment to Christ today and our commitment to each other as we serve selflessly. In the name of Christ. Amen. Pastor Robbie.